Namaste, 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 everybody, and of course, very particularly for our wonderful guest here, who is a hybrid in herself, but is actually one of the first spokeswomen or spokespeople that we've had on Deep Dialogues, who has the breadth of experience that Sheila has in relation to extraterrestrial, ultra-terrestrial consciousness. And so it's very exciting to have you here. So thank you for agreeing to come on.
Oh, thank you for the invitation.
It's my pleasure. And I don't know if you can actually see this, but this is Sheila's book that she wrote with a co-author, Barbara Lamb, who's also a very extraordinary hybrid, a ufologist, which is published by this extraordinary publisher that has been bringing so many wonderful authors to me. So don't forget, we'll make sure that all of this information is in the tagging content below the thumbnail of our video. So who is Sheila? Sheila is a soul exchange walk-in aspect of the Yahni Omnistream of Consciousness. Now, don't worry, she's going to explain to us what that means. At the same time, Sheila is an international speaker and the co-author of Cosmic Convergence, Journeys of Walk-in Starseeds and Hybrids, and her own book, Walk-ins, The Cosmology of the Soul. Her Omnistream carries over 128 different soul lineages that compose of Angelic, Pleiadian, Arcturian, Sirian, Lyran, Mantis, Andromedan, and so on and so forth. Sheila is the founder of Conscious Awakening Network and SpiritWay Wellness. Welcome, dear Sheila.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
It's wonderful to have you here. You're such a lovely lady. Tell us, walk-in aspect of Yahni Omnistream consciousness. What exactly do you know this is?
Well, let me start by saying that if this experience had not happened to me, I don't know if I would even believe it myself, because I was not raised with any type of metaphysical knowledge whatsoever. I was a good church-going girl. And, about the furthest out of the box we got was to talk about angelics. And so what happened with me is I was a very ill person. I had been diagnosed with bone cancer, brain tumor, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, all of these things. I went to bed that way. And what happened was the next morning, it was as if someone reached down, grabbed me by the hair of the head, pulled me bolt right up in bed, and it was like lightning ran through my body. Now, at the time, I had absolutely no idea what was happening to me. I had no metaphysical knowledge. I had no foundational information to even begin to allow me to know anything. So when I started receiving information about the structure of the universe, and I started receiving information about past lives that I didn't even believe in. And I started receiving information about healing modalities that I'd never studied. The only thing I could think of was that, maybe I've had a psychotic break or something along those lines. Again, because I had no foundational information. And it has taken me since 1999, September 23rd, 1999, to really be able to find the language. And I've been able to do so through quantum science. And I've been able to do so through all the wonderful, metaphysicians that are out there. That's like, oh, yeah, that's what I'm seeing. That's what I understand. But the beautiful thing in this whole discovery process is I developed a very, very close relationship to, at first, what I thought were spirit guides. And that's a long story in and of itself. But at first, they were spirit guides who I then, it's like they became my best buddies. And they were talking to me all the time. And I was seeing them and I was hearing them. And they were telling me all kinds of things. And I'm like, what? I couldn't even believe some of the things that they were describing to me. One of them being, some of the foundational knowledge of the universal structures. And so in the book that I just wrote with Barbara Lamb, I tried to bring some of that information out. Now, some of the things that they also told me was a little bit more about who I was, because to be quite honest, I had never heard the term walk-in my life ever.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was through finding a spiritual teacher that really helped me to understand what the concept was. And even then, I found that very hard to digest. It's like, but it rang true. And for me, the understanding was what had happened to me when that lightning ran through my body. That was the new soul coming in. And I failed to mention that I was propelled upright in bed and the old soul ejected out. And so when I started to understand that, one of the first questions I had is like, am I a body snatcher? What the heck happened here? And I began to understand that a walk-in is a soul that literally trades places with another soul who is on their way out anyway, or who has a contract. Maybe they only needed to experience like 25 years, or maybe they just needed to experience the birth of the mitosis process, that explosion of life that's happening. Or maybe, like me, they needed an adult form in which to come in. And I still found that hard to believe. It's like, okay, one soul changes, another one leaves. Where did the first soul go?
Okay.
And they
Let me step in, because you're mentioning a lot of fascinating concepts, but we need grounded definitions. Firstly,
yes,
1999.
Yes.
Crucial.
Yes.
There we were with this hovering miasma of energy over our heads called the Y2K bug.
Yes.
And so the world was going into this paroxysm of fear or uncertainty or whatever, because we knew that all of our computer equipment was going to crash, and therefore all our supply chains, all of our energy supply chains would actually break down. But something happened for you. So what was the trigger?
It was the illness. It was the illness, and this soul was ready to leave. Now, consequently, the story gets a little stranger. Yeah. So I, prior to inhabiting this body, was part of a collective of beings that I now call the Omnistream, because it's not just one soul, it's multiple souls. And it's not just the oversoul. And the oversoul, to me, if this is the oversoul, and these fingers are what's called the Shantias Khans. And these Shantias Khans hold all the information for particular lifetimes. These are your multidimensional aspects. And so throughout our existences, I was told that within my particular oversoul, there's 144 aspects, but I have only met 128 of those. But what happened is we were in a state of pure consciousness. And we were connected with...
What do you mean in a state of pure consciousness? What does that mean?
We were disembodied. We were totally disembodied. We had gone through a series of experiences, both in form and out of form, in this universe and in other universes, individually, and had come back collectively. Okay? So our oversoul had come back together, and we had begun to merge with other oversouls that were like us. And we were in this state of just pure consciousness. Now, the cool thing about being in pure consciousness is you know everything, but you know nothing. So you know
just unpack that.
You know what it's like, let's say, to be the apple on a tree. But you also know what it's like to be the seed in the earth with growing into the tree. You know what the life force coming into the tree feels like. You know what it's like to hold the apple. You know what it's like to bite into the apple. You even have the idea of the taste, but it's very different when you get to experience it. So we had all the knowledge without the tactile experiential components to it.
Was the sensory tactile necessary?
No, it really wasn't.
And it wasn't
but it's
necessary.
Enjoyable. It's a gift. It's fun.
Well, from this human perception.
from the human perception.
But if we're omnipresent, we're ubiquitous. And really what you're describing for me is you're describing the experiences that I had as a child with the elemental kingdom, introduced by my grandfather, who was a farmer, who was a genuine man of the soil and spoke Fey language and whispered his horses. And, it was extraordinary. I carry his name as my second name, John Barker. He actually had, he introduced me to what it was to be in total beingness, so that I became part of the tree, so that the tree was me and I was the tree. There were no divisions in terms of the physicality of my body, but I was literally, as you were just saying, I was with the photonic light, the phyto light that was being absorbed by the leaves, but I was also going deep into the roots all the way through, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
But of course, this is a human perception that is bewildered because of the sensory referencing that we have. But if we go into the level of consciousness of omnipresence that you were talking about, then it's not bewildering because it's ubiquitous.
Yes, absolutely. And we were in this state and everything was great. We were able to observe all types of things. And the last memory, if you will, in the observation mode was that we were observing something in the Andromedan system, which is another long story. But all of a sudden, we felt this calling, if you will, but it was a vibrational frequency that rippled throughout us. And without even a yes or no, we answered the call. And that call was to Gaia herself. And she had placed a call out into the universe seeking souls, if you will, to come and to assist her with her ascension process. Because one of the things that had happened over time is around the earth, we have what's called the crystalline grid. And this crystalline grid holds the frequency, and it should be 5D frequency. But over time, because of a piezoelectric field that had been beamed into the crystalline grid, it had begun to be corrupted. And of course, then we have false matrixing, and we have the ideas of separation, whereas we should have had the omnipresence being beamed into us. Okay. And so she was calling for other souls to come. We had actually entered into the crystalline grid. And by entering in, there's filaments of light, almost like liquid light, that run through this crystalline structure. And so all of the consciousnesses merged into this. And because we are without form, I mean, we're talking trillions of souls of like mind, and they're still there, by the way, radiating out a lot of these higher ascension codes or a lot of these higher light codes. Yeah. And that's what we were doing when the soul of this body cried out to be released. Then it was decided in a split second, but it was a decision. There was a plan. There was an agreement, because you've got nonlinear time. But this soul was like, I'm out of here. I'm sick. I'm in pain. I can't handle it anymore. And it wanted to be released. So it was decided that I would be the aspect to come in. Now, when I first came in, I assumed the Sheila personality because I didn't know anything other than that. And even once my spiritual teacher began to explain to me what a walk-in was, I was still in the Sheila personality, trying to humanize this grand experience that she's describing for me. And so through working with her, I learned shamanism, which is exactly what you were describing with your uncle, where you were able to connect with the tree. And by her teaching me these steps, I was able to work deeper with my guides to where they began to explain that, yes, we're a little more than your guides. We are you, you are us. We are part of a collective, but our collective is part of the Omnistream of Consciousness because we are in this expanded state. And in this expanded state, if we need to work with the ascended masters, those frequencies just enter in and flow in very seamlessly. If I'm working with someone and they need the Mary Magdalene energy, then that energy just flows in seamlessly. Not that we are Mary Magdalene, but we're able to connect with that frequency through the Omnistream. And so I used to not talk about that because for me, it was strange enough to talk about being a walk-in.
Yeah. So I'd love to just question this further. You okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry.
The many people that watching will be hearing this extraordinary story and will have lots and lots and lots of questions bubbling through their system, as well as totally absorbing the clarity with which you speak. So what I'm fascinated with, just so that everybody feels more illustrated, is we have so much perceptual information that's being given to us, and particularly at the moment, as we both know, as we all know, because of the nature of what's happening on our planet, what's happening within our bodies, what's happening within the universe, what's happening within the multiverse, what's happening within the cosmos, and let me not forget the galaxy. There's so much stuff going on. So what point did you reach where you no longer needed the befuddled, confused, what's a walk-in, when actually you are living the walk-in? When did the absorption or the dissolving fully into physical matter, because I'm sure that if we were with you and we did this, you would say, ouch, why are you banging my arm? So you are human, but of hybrid omnipresent consciousness. So when did that shift take place, where you didn't need to grapple with walk-ins or any other terminology? Is the universe friendly? All of that stuff.
Right. So over time, first off, because I came into the Sheila personality, the body had to heal itself, which actually instantaneously occurred. But I had to break the behavioral patterns around what brought me to that place to begin with. I changed everything about myself. Everyone who met me was like, who are you? I mean, I had that question asked a lot of times. I was like, what do you mean? I'm just me, kind of thing. But all of my taste changed in food, clothing, music. Everything about me was different. And so slowly, drip by drip, this consciousness, the soul was already embedded, but it was more like an awakening of a flower as it began this unfoldment process. And probably around really 2012, everything really solidified and anchored in that I no longer had to say, gosh, I really don't understand this anymore. And the knowledge just began to pour in. And part of the beauty of that knowledge was the expansion back into that omnipresent state. And so I could look around and understand that everything that's happening, including what's happening right now on such a minute scale, is part of the greater consciousness of the source energy. And that we are but a template that has unfolded. We are a concept that's been brought to life over in this tiny little sector over here. And we've got all this other stuff that's happening. But everything is within the mind of source. And so that expansion into the remembrance of oneness and understanding that we are here to have a human experience and to actually experience the opposite of what we experience on the other side. And so our soul grows through trials and tribulations and pain, and on the other side, when we decide to come in, it's like, okay, just how nitty gritty can we get? Just how human can we become? How much pain can we endure? How much suffering? How much expansion can happen? How much remembrance can occur? And so when I dropped into that state,
just pause for a moment, because I know you have this stream of consciousness that you can just go on for the next 4 hours, and I would just be sitting here listening. But you're mentioning some very intriguing pointers of the way that your consciousness was awakening in this radical way, which we know is not new to Homo sapien or Homo noeticus, but is now being spoken of throughout the universality of our world within hybrid situations to do with mind, body, and spirit, or the human potential movement. And people aren't sneering or saying that's woo-woo, etc., etc.
Right.
But the point that I really wanted to make was the crucial, I mean, I've already referred to it as being the cruciality of 99, but now you're talking about 2012.
Yes.
And of course, we know that this was a huge event for planet Earth. My full meeting with the angels, they were around me as a child, unusual child, because I was synesthetic. So I found it very difficult to learn very basic reading, writing, and arithmetic skills, because I was constantly in touch with multidimensional processes. Won't go into the whole bio, but I fully awoke when a friend invited me to celebrate the harmonic convergence in 1987 at Glastonbury, which of course we know is a very powerful earth node, or the heart chakra of the world. And that's when, during meditation in my lunch breaks, I was reading all morning and reading all afternoon and into the evening for, as my friend Tony said, the world and his wife are going to arrive. And sure, it was packed. And this is where I saw the angels. So I know that they appointed that preordained time 12,000 years ago in Atlantis, that they would reappear to me. And your awakening was evidently very crucial in terms of the complete healing of all of the manifestation of illness that took place. Did they by any chance give you that healing in 99, or just post it when you were coalescing, because it must have been a huge cellular, I mean, I know I experienced a white light going all the way through me and through my heart. And I thought I was going to have a heart attack in that moment. And Michael was saying, we're holding on to you, we're holding on, I mean, Archangel Michael, we're holding on to you, we're holding on to you. No, we want to provide you with an awakening which will provide you with the understanding of a past memory. So you will remember the Temple of Sound Healing that you created on Atlantis, which you will call the Alchemy of Voice for now, etc., etc. So this is a physiological process. We know this is not a mental process. It's about complete embodiment. So why were those dates so significant, do you think? Because there was a preordainment for you to be a walk-in.
Right.
So you're one of the most rational walk-ins that I've met.
Well, thank you.
You're lucid.
Thank you. We were already in the crystalline grid, actually part of that convergence and the concordance, pulsating that energy into Gaia. And so that, first off, that was necessary in order for a vibrational shift to occur on the planet that allowed for higher consciousness to be able to anchor onto the planet. Now, we're all omnipresent. It's just some of us remember a little more than others, but we are all the same. I'm not anything.
So what you're saying is that we have the potential.
We do. We have the
potential. You can't say
potential.
to somebody you're omnipresent if they're not omnipresent. We have the potential for the huge potential of our consciousness. But if somebody actually has a sensory deprivation simply because of trauma, or of the fact that they've been living certain lives where they've been spending most of their life out of their body or engaging in addictive behaviors, then they're not omnipresent. But we have the ability to connect with omnipresence.
Right. Well, they're still connected to omnipresence, but they've just chosen to have this experience to come in where they are in a state of total disconnection.
I'm being very ipso facto, do you see? Because we know that they're not awakened.
They're not aware.
They wouldn't even know if you said you're omnipresent.
Correct.
I mean, you and I know because we see extraordinary beings around the dear ones who come to us. And we mention who they are because we feel that it's going to be a real awakening for the dear ones sitting before us. Because after all, we're talking about the greatest love, the greatest level of eternal consciousness, the awakening to omnipresent potential. And they say, what do you mean? And that's what I'm talking about, you see.
Right.
So there's a level of consciousness which is waiting to be awakened. So your preordainment was in time with planetary shifting. That's the point that I'm getting at. And do you have an omnipresent awareness of why that was seeded within you, and when it was seeded within you through being within what I would describe as a monad, this collection of non-corporeal beings that were, of course, many, but you're all as one.
Yes,
And you
right.
mentioned 144,000, so.
Yes, and in the book, I also talk about the monadic structure and the ascension of the soul process. So, that's perfect that you brought that up, because in order for the consciousness to awaken, the vibrational consciousness of the planet had to raise to meet the vibrational frequency that I had. So if I came in fully awake and aware, I would have just been walking around spinning my wheels, frustrated, and probably put in a straitjacket, to be quite honest. But over time, and after 2012, it's so funny. So many people, they're like, oh, nothing happened in 2012. Oh my gosh. There was such a huge shift that happened.
It's very interesting, wasn't it? Because there was that build-up of expectation.
Yes.
And everybody thought that we're just going to walk into the fifth dimension. And then we met 2013 with all of those planetary constructs.
Yes.
There were so many planets who were conjunct or in opposition that we all went boom and had to deal with with karmic healing, and everybody was saying, oh my God, I thought I was going to be walking into the fifth dimension. No, you have to work for that.
Right. And that's...
So what was your preordainment?
Well, when I came in, all of the information was here, but it could not be released until there was a vibrational frequency on the planet that would match it. Because for me, this was so far outside of my current stream of consciousness that I really had to have time for the brain to catch up with what was happening internally. Yeah. I also had to have this space in which I could begin to break the old behavioral patterns. I could begin to break some of those ancestral miasms that had followed the cellular structure into this body. And I had to start looking beyond that to some of the soul wounds that had actually been brought in, and so there was a lot of spiritual teachings for me from my collective at the time that was teaching me about how everything operates, how this planetary system is set up. Okay. So after 2012, I was able to start awakening a little. You also have to remember, I came into the body of a 38-year-old woman who had 3 children. So I had to get my children grown.
You had to get your shit together.
Exactly. Thank you. And so
your mommy is still here. It's not that you become.
That's right. So, you can only become so enlightened with 3 kids hanging on you. Okay. And so as the children got older, though, I was able to step more and more into who I am and the soul mission that I had. And that soul mission being, like so many of us that have come here to be a way shower, to help awaken humanity. But mine specifically is to help people remember who they are, that they are this aspect of the source energy. I got into the healing work because I was told, you said, humanity cannot drop into the essence of who they truly are when they're in pain. And so I began to look at a variety of modalities, whether it was physical modalities, emotional, mental, whatever it would take to get someone out of pain. And I did that for many, many years. And then during the writing of this book, my collective has always been very active with me. And, I used to think I was like the vessel and the Sheila was here. No, the Sheila personality left. And what's here is the collective stream itself. And so during the unfoldment and the writing of this book, I became acquainted with one of my Andromedan aspects, who is an elder mother, and her name is Tiamu. And she began to channel light language through me and began to provide these new light codes within my own holographic field that allowed me to yet again expand out. and to connect in more with who I am. And honestly, since that occurred, and that was like a year ago, yeah, every time I think, oh, I got this down. Yeah, I'm human,
Well,
but
it's
I'm
an
also,
evolutionary path, isn't it?
pardon me?
It's an evolutionary path.
Oh, absolutely.
That's the purpose of chronology.
Absolutely.
That's
Absolutely.
I know we love to play from an intellectual point of view. We love to play with, well, I'm on this timeline, but I'm really on that timeline. And it's, wait a moment, because that's just abstract intellectualizing.
Yes.
But actually coming here, we are in profound respect of why did Divine Mother, Father, God, Source choose that planet Earth would be a three-dimensional planet for a considerable amount of time and have animal, vegetable, and mineral living upon her, and now recognizing that another gateway is opening, etc., etc. I mean, it's huge. It's a time of renaissance. It's just we can't call it that because we're living it. But in 300 years' time, they'll look back and they'll say, that was the, and I hope it's the galactic renaissance, rather than, well, that was the year of the War of Independence, or that was the French Renaissance, or the Elizabethan Renaissance, or the Italian Renaissance, that it's the galactic Renaissance. Was what I'm intrigued by is how there's so much muddled thinking around from many from our colleagues, and I don't mean that as a judgment, I just mean it as an observation, because I love them all, and I think what they're doing is absolutely extraordinary. But there's a lot of muddled thinking about the exquisite nature of cosmological omnipresent intelligence. Remember, I've been well taught for over nearly 40 years by these angels, but they were around me when I was a child, so I was being taught then. And as I said earlier, it's quite true. If my dear mother were here, she would say, Stewart was a very unusual child because I was living more within the multi-perceptual nature of light and sound than I was within 3D. I was actually most of the time out of my body, except I had a loving mother, paragon of unconditional love, who kept yanking me back into my body so that I did feed myself and so that I did know how to go to the bathroom and so forth. I mean, these are all very common pursuits of the human being. But how we, the point that I was really making is that how we can perceive cosmology, but not through the lens of just human perceptuality, that we can actually gird up our loins and lift ourselves into the beauty and the splendor of what cosmic divinity is really all about. Because that's ultimately what you and I are talking about, isn't it?
Right, absolutely. And, when people talk about aliens and they talk about UFOs and they talk about all of this stuff, to me, it's so natural. It's just source embodying in a different form. That's it. That's it. And we are all the same. We are all connected. If you go up high enough through the monadic structure, we are all connected to that one source mind, having these experiences. So whether we were in the Atlantean times, whether we were in Alpha Centauri, whether we were in a different universe of liquid light, those are all experiences. And that's what we're here to do. The richness of understanding who we are allows us to expand and to feel through the human form what it is to be that source energy. Because as I said, when we were in a disembodied state, we had the knowledge, but here we can feel it. We can wake up to it.
Let's just unpack that slightly, because that's also quite a new concept for a lot of humans. Of what does that mean? What does it mean to be non-corporeal? What does it mean to be without a body, but still within the totality of what that consciousness is all about? I mean, from the intelligence point of view, because after all of our experience is perceptually registered through the five senses. They're the edge of our consciousness. So what is it like as a human now, although you're really a hybrid? What is it like to see those two vistas and approach your humanity with that multi-perceptual spread, as it were? And it's not even a spread because there's no space. It's all experience, isn't it? It's all happening, but it's not even happening because that's a time word. It's very reductionist. What I love is that the vibration that I receive from you as you speak is that you're able to move beyond restriction that is created by the intellect and the belief systems that the intellect or the egoic mind holds on to, because you're giving us an experience of what multidimensionality can really be about in its ubiquity. You know, you're really, from a vibrational point of view, you're getting, and that's what I was wanting to unpack or to, you know, to receive, because the ideas are the ideas are the ideas, and they're fascinating as far as I'm concerned, but they're just ideas. And really what we're looking for is, well, where is the rooting, where is the seeding, which is why I was asking about your preordainment. Why did your monad, or the omnipresent nature of Yahni conscious, omnipresent consciousness, why was 99 and 2012 chosen?
Yes. Well, again, it goes back to the vibrational energy of this planet. Now, when I came...
I know, but why were you chosen to be awoke? We know that. But why were you chosen to be awoken at that time? Because as human, it was like, wait, what's going on?
Yeah. And so from our perspective, it was the time to come in, to begin to slowly, not just unpack the knowledge that I was carrying, but also to begin to plant seeds, because I'm actually the boots on the ground aspect of the Yahni. And so wherever I go, I am actually, if you know, the little sparklers that you have during holidays that, you know, put off all the little fire pieces, that's kind of what happens as I'm walking throughout somewhere. I'm just spreading light codes. I'm sending light codes. I'm pulling them up from Gaia. I'm sending them down from Gaia. I am like the physical conduit, the representation of the Yahni. And when I ask about the Yahni, because there are no names, there is nothing, but that was something that they did for me, because as a human, then I'm to say, oh, this is our little sector. This is who I am. Because as humans, it's very important for us to have an identity. It's very important for us to have the egoic state of our being say, yes, this is who I am. And so through that, when 2012 happened, then the languaging could start to come out, because now all of a sudden humanity has awakened to this larger aspect of themselves, and I could better communicate. I could pull in more energy and bring that down and anchor it, because, you know, this ascension process has been going on since the dawn of humanity, you know, our consciousness, but moving into the 5D is the anchoring of the truth of who we are, because it's like we have the projector inside of us that projects out our reality. And so if our reality is 5D and we anchor this, and someone else anchors it, and someone else anchors it, and someone else anchors it, and it goes out into the collective consciousness, the next thing you know, we've brought 5D and anchored it here on the planet.
Absolutely. Well, that's the crucial point that I was hoping to get to, you see, because psychically I see it within you, but, you know, because this is an overt human, whatever we are, deep dialogue, I just wanted to share that with everybody so that they can see it, because the whole of your vibrational frequency has changed the more you go into Yahni consciousness. And so that moment when you said, well, forgive me, these are my words, but 99 and 2012 were apertures that I could come in, that I could allow Yahni omnipresent consciousness to come in through me. And that's why those times were chosen, that I was seeded, I was preordained to actually be this. So we see you as a gardener of the earth, but with cosmological consciousness and the love of the Gaia, knowing full well that every cell, every atom that she has is the all-oneness of the all-oneness that is part of what that field of consciousness was all about that you were revealing to us in such a beautiful way. By the way, I want to go back to words and what words really are and the identity consciousness that you were talking about, because obviously words are very significant to we humans in the sense that the limits of my language are the limits of my world. And the more expanded our vocabulary is, the greater our consciousness can expand, which of course you've discovered over the last 25 years. Because walk-in, what that is that? And now it's, wait a minute, what was I thinking of? Of course, it's pretty obvious what I am. I'd love to get to that because we're going into the field of consciousness that you were talking about. Incidentally, Yahni, you were saying there is no linguistic, but what is the seed syllable of Yahni meaning?
Yeah, I've never looked into that. What the vibration that came to me when they said the Yahni was dropping into a sacred space to hold energy. And so I don't, there may be an actual name. I've never researched that. But for me, it was like, this is the sacred container. This is the holder of the space that we can now work in, that we can now drop into, yet expand from.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. So it's this state of consciousness that just happens to vibrate through Yahni, if that's the way that we choose to sound it. I mean, the Ya is the most open vowel that we have, and then Ni. I wonder what the Andromedan Council would say. We're giving you this seed syllable. So what I'm reaching into is the field of divine logos.
Yes.
Where there are no words, but there is sound.
Yes.
Now that's where I was as a child, which is, when my voice broke after 2 years of mutism, I shut up for 2 years, and my voice broke. My mother said, "Darling, you keep humming. Let's put you into a church choir." And I thought, yes, because I just loved the way that they looked. I was really into look. I still am. I'm a real aesthete, but I was really into look because those boys in those cassocks and white surplices and those ruffs, I just thought they looked so cute, and I wanted it. And while I was in the incandescence of ritual, Church of England ceremony, and singing, I couldn't read. I had the book in front of me, but I couldn't read it. So I just aped the other boys. I copied the other boys. But then suddenly I saw, because I always floated on the sound as waves, because it was light for me, the words, the seed syllables of the words dropped in, and I started reading singing. So I saw that the words, although they were English, were part of syllables of sound that were higher harmonics that were given by divine logos. Does that make sense?
Well, absolutely. And it's so interesting because as and originally it's like, well, who am I and where am I and all these types of things, which now doesn't really matter. But at the time, I really had that need to know. And they said my individual frequency within this Yahni was Nuela. So my name, if you would, is Nuela Yahni. Well, in this lifetime, my name is Sheila Seppi. And so I carry the physical. Everybody's like, well, oh, that's so beautiful. Are you going to change your name? And I'm like, I don't have to change my name. It has the same vibrational frequency. If it was a different frequency, maybe, but it's the same. So Nuela, Sheila, Yahni, Seppi, it's all the same. And so you're right. Every syllable is so important because it's part of who we truly are past this cellular structure, because we are just nothing but light and sound.
Yeah. And it's very difficult because we're so literate. So as soon as we hear words, we see images of the word because we're literate. We read. But if you don't read, which was what my for the first 10, nearly 11 years was all about. My brother, on the other hand, who was my psychic code breaker, because I would look at him, we still do, and I would just go, and he said, "What Stewart's saying is this," and I hadn't said a thing. We still can do it. So we know when we're very separate because we're very extraordinary people in our own right. But when we have contact, it's very interesting that we're always picking each other up psychically. So I know exactly what torment he's going through, because as we both know, living this level of spiritual consciousness in its hypersensitivity can be really difficult in planet Earth, because it can be so brutal and so cruel and so forth. Anyway, so we're really talking about the nature of sound, that then on this level of experience downloads into the word and we make sense. And that's why I believe we're given the code in Genesis of an Adam named all of the things in the garden, I paraphrase, so that we could become aware of, oh, on this level of experience, a tree is a tree and a worm is a worm and a snake is a snake and a woman is a woman. It's interesting that we've gone, just in contemporary context, from a socio-political point of view, we've gone through this whole sequence of defining what a woman is, for those people who are experiencing on some level, and dare I say on a slightly confused or crazed level, all of the multidimensionality that we're talking about, which is why they're so uneasy in their bodies. And the first thing that happens is they look for definition. Who am I? Because after all, what we've been educated to do is to know what we are.
Yes.
Through doing, et cetera, that educational force of, and most of the time we're not doing what we could be doing because they say so. So we're traumatized by overseen by our teachers, our mothers, the trauma of the past. And they're many transsexuals are trying to find out how they can live this hybrid spiritual consciousness and not get caught up in the conversation of, should I be a woman or should I be a man? Or maybe I'm something else, because they're obviously showing us that our sexuality is an evolutionary force.
Yes.
To the point of, I was intrigued just now when you talked of your Andromedan individual who was an Andromedan mother. So how do they conceive? Is she in flesh, or was she in flesh, or is she without flesh?
She is part of the Omnistream at this point. So she is still in the consciousness form, yet she is has the ability, I should say, to embody whenever it's necessary, because she is also part of a council of 9 Andromedans. And so, as she shares with me, she's like, I am a future aspect of you, yet I am here to work with you, to come through you. So like, if I'm working with someone in a session.
So this is it, isn't it? The cosmological reality of that is showing us what's happening. It's just that we don't quite know what to call it because it's so futuristic. I mean, we can share and not think, what on earth is he talking about? What's she talking about? We can share because vibrationally, we know from an empathic point of view, of course.
Right.
This is the multiplicitousness of what it is to be an omnipresent consciousness. Isn't that amazing that we can be within body or without body?
Right.
What do your children feel about Sheila?
The walk-in, actually my son is a walk-in as well. He came in at the age of 7 from a severe illness. And I heard when his body cried out to be released at 7 years old, this massive male, beautiful Sirian language began to just unfold from him. And he actually brought in a higher aspect of his angelic self. And he remembers like the war of the angels and has a very different perspective on some of the things that have taken place. And I'm like, well, why don't let me interview you? He's like, no, Mom, this is my story. I'm not going to share it. But as I helped him.
I'd love to have a conversation, as you mentioned. I'd love to have a conversation because the angels of Atlantis perceive it in a completely different way. I know we say the war and the duplicity between the light consciousness of Michael and Lucifer, etc. But actually they talk about it in a completely different way from the way that the Old Testament human Judaistic perception notes it. Because after all, God is an all-fearing God, as far as rabbinical text is concerned. And it's like, no, wait a minute. There's a wonderful angel called Raziel who was given the task of carrying the book of knowledge the book that Adam and Eve read, which of course was written by one of his cohorts, but in human form, the prophet Enoch, and was given the book and told to bury it in the deepest part of the earth by Yahweh, because no other human beings must read the book because of what took place, the so-called fall of grace. And so there is Raziel. This is the story in Kabbalah. There is Raziel thinking, what am I going to do with this book? Oh, I know. I'll drop it into the deepest ocean. The angel of the depths will look after it. And under the cloak of darkness, I'll come back and the book will all be mine.
There you go.
It's so human, this. And so there was the story being fulfilled in the sense of, Raziel is flying through the air and drops the book in the ocean. The angel of the depths looks after it. And then suddenly darkness comes, night comes. Mm-hmm. And there is Raziel, sort of hanging around on his wings, waiting for the dripping book, which comes up. And the angel of the depths gives it to him. But of course, in that moment, Raziel hears behind him, come here, what are you doing? And it's Yahweh saying, come here. And in Kabbalah, it said that Raziel is chained to the throne of heaven forever for his penance, because that's what an all-fearing God would do. And I say, no. Raziel is eavesdropping on all of God's conversations. So if you have a conversation with Raziel, it's a conduit right the way through, a neural pathway into the mind of God. So that's the way that I'm reinterpreting, which is infinitely more fun and much more useful than being punished.
Right.
Anyway.
Yes.
Okay. So I'd love to have a conversation with your son. He's now what age?
He's 28.
So he's going through his Saturn return. And is he talking about walk-ins or anything?
No, he's wanting to embrace being a 28-year-old male, having a human experience, and it's like, shh. No one needs to know. They can you can tell them you're a walk-in. That's cool, And my daughter also has had, a variety of awakening type experiences. And then my oldest daughter is very, very open to the concept only because she knew who I was previously. And she saw, she was 12 years old, and she saw that instantaneous change. And it was many years that I felt like I could share that with her. And when I did, she's like, oh, thank you so much for telling me that, because I knew no one can change that much. It's just not possible. And she said, now I understand. And so my children embrace, sometimes it's like, Mom, can't we talk about something else? Or, so it's like, okay, what do you want to talk about? Football or whatever. So, the family dynamics, we have a very open, communication about a variety of subjects, but we also have the 3D, family knit unit because that's what it's all about. It's about coming here and dropping in to the essence of this 3D experience, yet expanding beyond it while we embody the fullness of who we are in this moment.
Yeah. And sharing the fundament that as you speak these thoughts, these experiences, we feel it, because right at the core of it is your love for one another.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is, after all, that's what it's all about. Love, understanding, compassion, empathy, and boundaries.
Yes.
Mom, we're not going to talk about that. I'm going to meet my girlfriend,
Yes, exactly.
So wonderful. Because after all,
I'm bringing my girlfriend over. Don't talk about that.
Okay, this is wonderful, wonderful. So there's so much that we could be talking about, but the book.
Yes.
So the major thrust of the book, the major advantage of the books, I want everybody to get the book and read it. Cosmic Convergence, Journeys of Walk-in, Starseeds and Hybrids. Don't worry, everybody, we'll have a tag so that you know exactly where you can go to get, where you can go to Barnes & Noble or Amazon, but you know what the book is called and so forth. What's the main thrust? What's the advantage of reading the book?
My whole idea was to allow people to understand the multidimensionality of not just the universe, but themselves. So that as we are moving through the times that we are in, as we start talking, because 20 years ago, you didn't talk about walk-ins. That was a closet subject. Now it's kind of like, oh, you're a walk-in. Okay, cool. Yeah, I know 3 people that's a walk-in, or, whatever. But to allow people to have a basic understanding, because I look at this book kind of as from the cover all the way to the end as a glossary of information to help navigate the times that we are in with the multidimensionality, conception, so that we can bring that and anchor it into our own lives and not feel like, oh, we're talking about extraterrestrials. That's woo-woo. No, it's just another form of embodiment for source. And chances are you're part of their family. So, we need to be able to open up. And hopefully one of the things that will happen on this planet is, I am so sure that one of the reasons our galactic family has not shown up in full force is because we can't accept each other now. Someone talks about they're a he or a she, or, someone has a different color skin, or they're a particular height or weight or whatever. And people look at that at judgment. What would happen if we had people coming here who had the heads of birds, or who came here and looked ferocious? We have not yet reached that point of acceptance. And that's a lesson for ourselves, for humanity, to accept who we are as a soul level, to embrace that dark night, to embrace and to bring light to all the shadow aspects within us. And hopefully this book will help people to begin to open up and understand, so what? There was a bad thing that happened. What are you going to do? How are you going to move through that? How are you going to allow that to pivot you upwards? How are you going to be able to move through that with ease and grace, understanding that it's just a human experience?
And, we speak at a very extraordinary time, don't we? This, ladies and gentlemen, we're actually recording this on April the 23rd, which in the history of this kingdom, the United Kingdom, is always reputed to be Shakespeare's birthday. That actually is myth. It was possibly his death, not his birth, because nobody knows his birth. However, it is St. George's Day, and St. George is the patron saint. So this is a very important day from that point of view, from a terrestrial point of view. But from an extra and ultra, the amount of astrological persuasion that is taking place, particularly between Saturn conjunct with Rahu at the moment, that I'm hearing from my team, from the angels, that there is this photon belt, which we were talking about pre-show chat. And these particles are going to awaken the seed consciousness that you were talking about, that were implanted millennia ago through either the 144,000 Elohim or through your own omnipresent field of consciousness, your guys, your team. And as a result of these particles coming in on this photon belt, they are old fabrics of ourselves that became separated when unloving took place millennia ago, and certainly over the last 12,000 years of all the lives that we've lived. And now is the time for a spiritual audit to take place, which I think is the most extraordinary thought. For what? Well, to elevate our intelligence into understanding that there is always a choice, even in deep pain or in deep poverty, or, suddenly we're made redundant, or we have to go into bankruptcy, whatever the situation is, that we always have a choice of walking the path of the shadow, or really going into, why am I creating this? Because I'm just experiencing untold despair and pain, and this is affecting my physiology. So I'm not just going to take the pills that my doctor's giving me. I'm going to go deeper. We ask these intelligent questions of ourselves. So this is beautiful for the main thrust of the book. It's a real ideology. And as we look at all of these issues and themes that we've chatted about, dialogued about, when you dig deep into your heart as the seat of the soul, what do you want to see in the world?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, by that, Gaia.
Yeah. It's the unconditional love brought back. Because when we have that unconditional love, that means that we have dropped into who we are and that we experience ourselves as the all. Whether it's a war, whether it's famine, whether it's gluttony, whatever it is, that we drop into that and we find that love space. Because when we can do that and we anchor that onto the planet, then that's when heaven on earth, that new earth, the 5D earth, becomes the reality that we walk in.
I love it. And I completely concur.
Yes.
They're your beautiful words, but I'm right there. Sheila, this has been the most amazing conversation. Thank you so much for coming on DT Dialogues. And I would love for you to come back and talk about the next aspect of awareness building, which is, all of the information that you're receiving from the omnipresent nature of Yahni Omnistream. I think that would be absolutely amazing in a few months' time to give us because we're going through this spiritual audit at the moment. So we're going to chronologically, because we're still living time, go into a reckoning where we look back and think, wow, look what I've uncovered. So I'd love you to come back if you can bear it.
I would love it. That would be wonderful. Thank you so much.
I'm really saying, no way, Jose. Bless you. Please stay where you are. While we close down. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure that this has been a really invigorating experience for you. And hopefully we've been very clear in our dissemination of information. And thank you for being here. And, don't forget that this is now, Deep Dialogue is occurring not every week, but every month. And soon we're going to have the wonderful Matthias Di Stefano. Unfortunately, just for an hour. We have parallel lives, Matthias and I, so we could go on talking for at least 3 or 4 hours and recorded it, which is something he's promised me that we will do. However, Sheila's Deep Dialogue will be up very, very, very soon. So bless you for being here, and namaste, namaste, namaste. Thank you, Ryan. Please stay where you are, Sheila.